And I would like to thank Megan for doing the whole front end of this service so I could save my dulcet tones for the message. Go Bears. It never ends, or at least it seems like it never will. It, of course, being bad news, disturbing news, jarring news, news of things that are gut-wrenching, that you feel deep inside, things that yell and claim out loud that there really is a new and unpredictable way of things in American public life. That so many of the things we never questioned now need to be questioned. We can't rely on normal value constructs like respect and honor because these have been deflected and ignored. We cannot shame our government legally or ethically because they show no shame. The game afoot is one of power. Power exerted, power threatened, power extolled. A week or so ago, Trump's close advisor, Stephen Miller, said to a news person, "We live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else, but we live in a world, in the real world, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world. We're a superpower, and under President Trump, we are going to conduct ourselves as a superpower." Here, of course, Miller was speaking of international relations and the most recent play to acquire Greenland, showing an utter disdain for history, for our treaties and agreements, for the people of Greenland, Denmark, and Europe, or any sovereign nations in the world. And this is the same American regime that just kidnapped the Venezuelan president in a military raid, ostensibly to cripple drug cartels. But then they left Maduro's associates and cronies in charge of the country, except for the oil industry. Domestically, weakened government agents are becoming a fealty system where opposition is punished overtly by loss of jobs, by mocked up criminal investigation, by removal of funding. The fight is over who holds power, who has authority, and who empowers the power. Now we know the government controls most instruments of power, and because the president is not currently answerable to the Congress and barely contained by the judiciary, Donald Trump and the executive agencies are enjoying a clear and unimpeded run of nearly full and arbitrary control. And I can guarantee that they, although I still don't know who they really are, do not intend to let the power be taken away, to be given back. Within the United States, the headline issue today involves ICE, the Department of Homeland Security, and the city of Minneapolis. ICE has a mandate to harass and terrorize marginalized communities, especially Black and brown marginalized communities, nominally for immigration enforcement. Somehow, a discovery of welfare fraud in agencies serving the Somali community in Minneapolis was seen as justifying a major ramp up of the ICE activities in Minnesota. One woman, acting as a volunteer observer, engaged with ICE officers because her vehicle obstructed their passage. They commanded her to leave the vehicle and grabbed for her door handle. She tried to drive away from the scene and was shot 4 times in the face through her windshield. She died very soon thereafter, after being denied medical attention from a passing physician. America reeled at this trauma, which was filmed numerous ways and shown nonstop over our televisions and other devices. The event will be dissected and debated for months, and maybe sometime we will come to a shared opinion of what we all saw. But Renee Nicole Good was killed in this atrocity. Mother of a grade school son, community activist. Say her name, Renee Nicole Good. Remember her. Our president was quick to report that she and her partner were professional agitators. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem went public with an accusation of domestic terrorism. Both of these, while Renee Good's car was still standing where it had crashed, well before they had time to learn anything about the truth of the matter. Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey both claimed that the shooting was unjustified and that the portrayals of Renee Good were unfounded. So, in the week since, both Tim Walz and Jacob Frey are now both subjects of federal investigations. And Becca Good, Renee's partner, is also under federal investigation. The one person not being investigated is Jonathan Ross, the ICE agent who did the shooting that morning. This follows form. Our administration will do what it can to punish any opposition and to protect its own. How did this shooting affect you? I'm sure you recall. How do any of us respond to trauma? But we need to respond. We need to react. We need to shout out loud and clear that this is not the America that we knew. This is not the America that we want to know in the future. We need to let all who can hear us know that this reeks of injustice and offends every sensibility we have, that it violates the sanctity of life and all that we hold sacred. We need to find our anger and to express it aloud, explaining always why we are so angry. We need to introspect so that we know ourselves what pains us, what angers us, what offends us in these current events. And we will always come back to those things we hold as fundamentally important to our shared being. We believe that our lives are best lived with goodness and grace, ruled by compassion, justice, and mutual care. We might know this because we understand our lives to involve 6 core values with love held in the center, or because we follow 7 shared principles, or because we follow the teachings of Jesus, or Allah, or the Buddha. All of these teach us to do no harm. All are common sense ways to live into our humanity. So maybe now I'll start to turn to nonviolence, which is supposedly the topic this morning. Nonviolence is not passivity. We can understand that just sitting back and doing nothing will not help engage and improve our world. Nonviolence is the basis of a long tradition of engagement and response to power. Nonviolence is nonviolent resistance to authority, making an overt claim that authority is flawed or illegitimate in a way that must be protested. We respond to inequity, unfairness, injustice, and wrongdoing with feelings, usually feelings of outrage or anger. Often our first impulse, is somehow to strike out at whatever offends us, to hit back, to gain a sweet taste of justice and revenge. But that's not really a practical thought. As Stephen Miller explained just a little earlier, real power is based on the ability to control, to threaten violence or to bring violence to bear in a situation. Raw physical violence, destroying property, taking lives, removing freedoms. This is the why of armies, armaments, and all kinds of weaponry, to be able to assert and maintain control over opposing forces. The bottom line is always expressed with the capacity to render harm. And as mere individuals, or as groups with shared sentiments, we cannot face a whole nation on equal footing in the field of conflict. The power of the state far outweighs whatever we might bring to bear, and we would be fully crushed in an overt battle. There's a prescribed message for seeking change and bringing about changes. The process of elections and voting and finding representation that will engage in working to implement our outcomes, the ones that we prefer. But this involves several things, and mostly it involves waking up the public to the real need and peril of today. And that's where we can only stand up and be strong. The tradition of nonviolent resistance as we know it can be drawn clearly from Henry David Thoreau through Mohandas Gandhi and on to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Thoreau was one of our people. He hung with the Unitarians, although it's not clear that he was one. He was an enigmatic guy who made his own way through the world. He was a friend and close colleague of Ralph Waldo Emerson and an important influence among the transcendentalists. He had strong moral standards and was deeply troubled by the issues of his day, slavery and the U.S. involvement in the Mexican War. So in response, he refused to pay taxes to a government that supported such injustice. And eventually he landed in Concord jail. His essay, Civil Disobedience, is a reflection on this action. He said things like, all men recognize the right of revolution, that is, the right to refuse allegiance to and to resist the government when its tyranny or its inefficiency are great and unendurable. Now, in this case, either his aunt or Emerson, nobody knows who, paid his taxes, and he was freed after only 1 day's imprisonment. So he's not a Nelson Mandela or even a Martin Luther King. He spent one night in the Concord jail with one other guy there. But disregarding that, he thought about the principles involved. And his idea of employing legal disobedience to bring attention to conscientious objections influenced many others over time. And directly, this is a matter of record. Gandhi read his essay and combined it with Hindu theology to start to lead large strikes, protest movements, and eventually the movement for Indian independence from Britain. He leaned into the Hindu principle of ahimsa, non-harming, which calls for nonviolence and compassion in all aspects of living, speech, action, and intention. King first ran across Thoreau's essay when he was in college, and then studied Gandhi's legacy and his works carefully. And he drew heavily on his own theology in his call to nonviolence. King's words, the Christian doctrine of love, operating through the Gandhian method of nonviolence, was one of the most potent weapons available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. In this statement, King highlights two things we need to notice. First, that nonviolent resistance is indeed a strategy of response. He used the word weapon to be utilized by choice. And second, that it's especially useful and available for those with little or no other power, namely those that are oppressed. As King and his followers developed the nonviolent resistance strategies, he articulated 6 key principles that he felt were essential to its implementation. And these are each important. First is that one can resist evil without resorting to violence. The second is that in nonviolence, we seek to win friendship and understanding of our opponents, not to humiliate them. Third, evil itself, not the people committing evil acts, should be opposed. Fourth, those committed to nonviolence must be willing to suffer without retaliation, and that suffering itself can become redemptive. That's a big pill. Fifth, nonviolent resistance avoids external physical violence and internal violence of the spirit as well. And lastly, nonviolent resistors must have a deep faith in the future, stemming from a conviction that the universe is on the side of justice. I have no idea what that. Against much opposition from a growing Black Power movement, King remained convinced of the value of nonviolence and its role in helping to create the beloved community, here and anywhere. He wrote, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. The beauty of nonviolence is that it seeks to break the chain reaction of evil." The night before he was murdered, King gave his famous "I've been to the mountaintop" speech, in which he said, "The choice we face is no longer violence or no nonviolence. The choice we face is nonviolence or non-existence." This statement should bring us new fear as our president and his allies keep returning to the rhetoric of realpolitik and projecting power politics into the world order. Similarly, power politics seem to be driving violent actions from the governments of Russia and Israel, to name obvious examples in the Western world. Nonviolent resistance is clearly an approach that has a strategic place for dealing with value confrontations for groups that hold fewer power resources, groups like us. Invariably, this resistance highlights the complaints of the small group, reduces the likelihood of direct physical conflict, and seeks to effect change by appealing to deeper values across the entire society or polity involved. There's a lot of things involved in protest besides for just nonviolence, but that's the place we have to start. I would also say that much of the effect of the nonviolent movement is found in how it changes the participants themselves. Both Gandhi and King made it clear that this approach will only work with a full buy-in from the participants. The movements have a clear chance of success only if they embrace nonviolence in their hearts and across all parts of their lives. It calls on nonviolent resistors to frame all life considerations as acts of love on their part and to resist urges towards negativity, payback, and retribution, as good as and as tempting as they might feel. Nonviolent response is a commitment. Last week, Governor Walz encouraged his constituents to act calm in response to the shooting and the increase in ICE engagements. This might have been a needed guidance for that moment, but acting calm is not a long-term solution. What is needed is for his constituents to get angry, to stay angry, and to channel that anger into a new type of calmness, a new internal peace, a calm that is not an act, but a transformation in themselves, learning to become exemplars of peace and determination. And always remember that nonviolent protest is not without risk and is not a protection from violence. Renee Good is one of many martyrs who found great harm at the same time as they tried to do great good. May we honor them always.